In this episode of the Orange Nerd Show, we were talking all about the summer box office. It's been a really, really weird summer for all these big blockbusters for Disney, Warner Brothers, Universal. It's been a crazy summer. We're going to break it down, speculate, talk about it up next on this episode of the Orange Nerd Show. Welcome aboard, everybody, to another episode of the Orange Nerd Show, where we talk about everything except the theme parks. Because you know what? Lately, I gotta be honest, guys. The theme park news lately has been kind of a snooze fest, man. You know, there hasn't been much going on over there on that end of the company, but the studio side, that's a whole other story. And we're gonna dive into it today. I'm gonna start with Mr. Vast Sky, Dr. Dre, host of the Freshly Squeezed show here on the channel. Dre, if you could let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
The best place to find me on social media is going to be at VashGuy on Twitter. It's going to be right down there. Just go ahead and type in it, and it should pop up for as well. We're going to learn a little bit more, I think, about Christine Wastelands McCarthy in the coming days. But as she would, or as she used to say, for all the
robust
discussion right there, it's going to be very, very interesting to have those conversations, I'm sure. And if you guys want to follow me, you can go do so right at the channel you're watching right now at OrangeGrow55. We have some amazing shows hosted by pretty much everybody here, right?
Yes.
This is freaking awesome. So, Orange Grove and Orange Nerd, hosted by the amazing gentleman to my left right there. Kitty corner to me is the amazing Citrus George with his amazing Citrus Corner, covering everything Walt Disney World news related. And below me is going to be Jay Shear talking about the amazing writing that involves the stories that impact our lives with his Story Geek show. And my own Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice, news, and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove.
Perfect. All right, fellas, let's dive right in. I'm going to share your screen, Dr. Dre. And right out the gate, headline: The Flash disappoints with 55 million debut. Pixar's Elemental flops 29.5 million in battle of the box office lightweights. Now, quick little disclaimer here. I actually did see The Flash last night. A lot of thoughts here. A lot with that movie. But Dre, go ahead and set the table for the box office stuff, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yes, because I think we have a couple of people on the panel that have seen a couple of films that are featured right here, so this should be a lot of fun right here. Variety coming out already. The Flash disappoints with $55 million debut. Pixar's Elemental flops officially with $29.5 million in the battle of the box office lightweights. This is by Rebecca Rubin right here. It essentially goes over how, yeah, you know, Flash has definitely got a harder battle in front of it with its tepid B cinema score. Apparently, it hasn't garnered that much great word of mouth outside of, I don't know, maybe what we've heard Steven Spielberg talk about it and lays praise on it. I think what is it? Tom Cruise said it was, you know, a great movie. I think James Gunn said it was one of the best superhero movies ever made. Well, apparently not. That did not resonate with audiences whatsoever. So that is going to be very, very difficult. However, there is some optimism that Elemental might be able to recover based on its good word of mouth. However, as noted in a few of these articles, talking to some leading industry experts, they're saying that they're not seeing the kind of data that they should be seeing if a recovery is to occur. But George, you actually saw Elemental, correct?
I did on Father's Day.
Okay, so I think you can tell us a little bit more about, you know, what are its long-term prospects. Is this a movie that's really going to resonate with the majority, or is this something that's, you know, maybe, you know, would resonate with specific people?
For me, I had high hopes for this film. I really wanted this film to succeed. It's like starting out with the opening weekend, because, I mean, lately we've been seeing a lot of flops, particularly with Pixar Animation Studios, you know, with Lightyear and Turning Red and what have you. And I really thought Elemental was going to be kind of that turning point. And unfortunately, what was tracking to be a flop weekend actually turned out to be true. As far as the movie itself, I actually enjoyed the film. I don't think it was Pixar's best, but compared to the last several films that was produced out of the studio, I enjoyed it. It had a very uh, deep message for me in particular, walking out of the theater, just because of some of the obstacles and challenges that I'm currently going through. It actually kind of spoke to me, and that's what I'm kind of so used to, especially with a Pixar film, is it kind of grabs your the heartstrings, and it's like it kind of resonates with your own personal life. So that's kind of where Elemental came from me. I enjoyed some of the soundtrack, the song "Steal the Show," which you don't really get too much when it comes to a Pixar film, is a good song, and I actually encourage people to listen to that song, "Steal the Show" by I forget the artist's name, but if you bring up the Elemental soundtrack, it'll be on there. However, there were some things that, again, and I'm going to try to be very subtle here, is with these films that keep on, and OG has pointed this out many times, because these films were in the pipeline for so long, so they kind of have to be flushed out a bit. But again, there are certain moments in the film that tend to lean towards one side of an agenda, so to speak, and it's just that constant repeat with these films. It's like they have to throw it in there. If it's like, if you have a good story, and if it just happens to include something or another in the story, it's like you don't always have to have something incorporated in there to make your point. That is what's so frustrating to me.
Well, yeah, and even like a movie like Spider-Verse, from what I understand, a lot of the agenda was left out of it, but there are they sprinkled a little bit in there. I think they got the trans flag makes an appearance in the movie, things like that. And again, I mean, that stuff doesn't bother me personally, but there are people out there that will definitely look to that and go, "Oh my God," It all depends on how it's really handled. I haven't seen Elemental. I don't know. To George's point, I don't know what was in there and what wasn't in there. I did see Flash. I got to say, with Flash, I wasn't like a big fan of that movie. I'm not a big Ezra Miller fan, to be honest. And there's like, because of all the multiverse stuff, you get a lot of Ezra in this movie. I don't want to spoil it, but there's a lot of Ezra in the movie. I mean, it's a little much, but Michael Keaton killed it. He absolutely crushed it. He was definitely the star of the show. He definitely saved the movie for me. But yeah, I didn't really love it. Now, Dre, you mentioned it's a bigger hill to climb for the Flash. I would agree. I'm hearing a lot more positive stuff coming out of Elemental. The budget is obviously lower. Elemental is also not like a signature film for the Walt Disney Company. I mean, the Flash is really kind of like that was a real kind of tentpole, like big time movie for Warner Brothers. It was heavily pumped, and like it kind of sold as like almost like an Avengers kind of level comic book movie, where Elemental has always felt a little smaller to me, a little more Inside Out-ish.
Well, and that's kind of the notion that I've been mentioning a lot to you fellas, and also on Twitter, that a conversation I was having with some people, is I think Elemental's big issue was even before the film was released, and it was for the promotion and the marketing of it. It's every time that you would see Elemental come up, it was the same trailer over and over again, where normally, particularly with a Pixar, they kind of show like a little teaser trailer where it kind of gives you like a 2 to 3 minute short of who these characters are. It may not actually give you the full storyline of what's going to go on the film, but you kind of get the gist of like what direction Pixar was going with that. And I feel like with this film, or more so recently with Pixar films, is they don't have that charm to them, where it's like they just kind of just throw the trailer out and they just do it as a repeat. And it's like, okay, well, let's release the movie now and hope for the best. And I feel like that was the downfall for Elemental.
Now, Jay, what are your thoughts? Now, have you seen either of these movies going into this?
No, I've seen, and this is what's crazy, right? Like, there's so many films coming out, just like we had in 18 and 19, 2018 and 2019. But I've seen Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which I thought was phenomenal, top tier MCU, and then I did see Spider-Verse. Little bit of a caveat with Spider-Verse. I was so exhausted going into Spider-Verse that I slept through a lot of it. Not because it was a bad film; it was an amazing film. but I just was too exhausted. I shouldn't have put myself in a dark room that had layback seats, like
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I haven't seen either of these two films, and mostly because I'm in the middle ground here because I have my tickets to see Dial of Destiny. Very excited about Dial of Destiny. You guys know I'm doing a huge Indiana Jones series here on this channel. So it's almost like we have to start picking and choosing what we want to watch. We can't go all the time. I was talking to my brother the other day, and one of the things that I think is also happening, he owns and operates an Auntie Anne's franchise. And so he kind of gets to see like how much people are spending on with their money, right? When they go into a mall. And what he told me, and this I resonate with this just even in my own personal life, is that the average order value is down, but the number of orders is actually up. So what that says to me, and I think it's indicative to the marketplace as a whole, is we've seen this rampant inflation. We have not seen salaries go up to match that. And so now people are saying, I'm going to be a little more picky and choosy with what I choose to go and do. And that was not the case when we had all the big slate of movies come out in 2018 and 2019. Those years still felt pretty good in terms of financial ability to spend money on things. And so what I think we're seeing is we're just seeing a little bit of a slowdown in people saying, well, I can only see 4 movies this summer. I can't see 8 movies this summer. Right. So what am I going to go see? Right. Because that's how I felt. I felt like I can't go see I don't have enough time to see The Flash. I don't know if I want to see The Flash. It's getting kind of whatever reviews now. Yeah. And same thing I felt like with Elemental. It was like, I would love to be excited about this, but I've got to be excited about Indiana Jones later. I know that I'm going to go see Oppenheimer in the theater. I can only spend so much money in the theater right now, so I'm going to pick and choose what I'm going to pursue.
That's smart, and I think Jay, I think you're spot on with that. I think that people are being very particular as to what they see, and I think that they're just look. I mean, people might look at a movie like Elemental, might look at The Flash, and go, okay, those are interesting enough films, but is it worth price of admission? Is it worth going to the theater for?
And that is true.
Saying no.
And that is true, because even though one can argue that Elemental is an original Pixar, it's not based off of a previous movie as a sequel or a prequel. But at the same time, a lot of people were posting online that like the posters side by side of how similar Elemental looks to Inside Out. And Inside Out is already in the slate pipeline for a sequel. So it's like, there's that argument of saying, okay, even though it's an original, but they're kind of repeating themselves, like with these kind of character and story arc where it's like, can you change it up completely?
Right. Now, what do you guys think? I wanted to bring this up because, Dre, we've talked a lot about this on the phone. I want to kind of bring it to the audience and to Jay and George as well. What do you guys think? And I'll start with you, Dre. What do you think of Pete Docter right now? I mean, because, Pixar is kind of going through it. It's really probably the worst time for the studio that I can remember, at least, in terms of, the movies and just the overall quality of the movies, but overall, not so much the overall quality of the movie, but the box office and what have you, general public interest. What do you think, Dre? What does this mean for Pete Docter? Is his job in jeopardy right now, or is it possible that he can kind of skate by and get through this?
Yeah, I mean, this is tough here because Pete Docter's a great director and he's created some amazing film product. But there have been now 6 films since John Lasseter has, unceremoniously left the company in the way that he did. What do we have? Soul, Turning Red, Luca, Lightyear, Elemental, and I think there's one more I'm missing here. Onward, yep. And they've all not only have they suffered at the box office for various reasons, right? Some of them didn't even hit the box office.
Yeah.
But
they choked on a chicken bone.
Yeah, they all have lacked a kind of general resonance with the audience. And we're seeing that not just in how they're perceived individually, but in merchandise sales, consumer product, all of that. It's just they're even like with the various streaming services, I understand that some of these do chart when you're breaking it down by movie and so forth on Nielsen and some others. But, after it's had its debut, they don't last long on those on-set charts. And so that's going to be an issue here. And we're talking about a studio that is, as Matt Bellany from Puck actually said, this is a studio that is giving Iger problems when he is, when he has his neck full of problems.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting here because it talks about why this might be happening and why things may have changed under Pete Docter. It says this right here. And I can't share it because it's Bellany's article.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I do apologize, OG. I should have told you about that. But it says right here. So all of the issues that are happening with Pixar right now are on the shoulders of Pete Docter, a cerebral 50-something-year-old dude who started at Pixar as an animator in 1990 right out of Cal Arts and quickly became one of Lasseter's Brain Trust's most influential members, and then his somewhat reluctant replacement. Docter declined through a Disney rep to speak for this column, but in 2021 he told the Hollywood Reporter's Rebecca Keegan that he felt, quote, a little bit of dread when it was clear that Iger would ask him to replace Lasseter, with Jim Morris taking on the business side of Catmull's role. He said, I did wonder, if I said no, what happens? I don't want to seem too self-aggrandizing here, but I wasn't sure who else would do it. And so I said yes. Not exactly a ringing endorsement, as noted in the article. I asked a couple of long-term animation producers and executives what's going on creatively at Pixar these days, noting that it has been somewhat in decline. They noted that the films are still solid, industry best, and that's backed up by their RT scores, Rotten Tomatoes, which have stayed pretty high, but they may have lost a step in their broad accessibility. There's been a creative shift under Docter to more personal, filmmaker experience-driven storytelling rather than the more populist themes and humor heartstrings mix that Lasseter championed. Pixar has always cited the personal nature of its stories. Lasseter's own father worked at a Chevy dealership which led to cars, and his brain trusts Brad Bird, Andrew Stanton, Lee Unkrich, and others champion universality along with personal storytelling, but of all, the movies were fun. Now, this kind of differs from what Pete Docter is prioritizing. And that jives with what I've heard with one Pixar employee who lamented that individual filmmakers have been given more power and leeway to pursue storytelling that speaks to them personally rather than what might play in Peoria, as he puts it. And that may just be a cop-out for Pixar empowering different and more diverse voices than Lasseter did. The studio famously did not have a female feature director until Chapman, who was replaced, and its diversity numbers weren't great. These days, Kemp Powers, who was black, directed Soul with Docter, and Domi Shi co-wrote and directed Turning Red, and the pipeline is much more diverse, which is great. But
okay, here we go. Okay, here I go, because this pisses me off to literally. So here goes my rant, and honestly, this is where I get pissed off at Pete Docter, because yes, he is a phenomenal filmmaker. I mean, he directed Monsters Inc., he directed Up, he directed Inside Out. Not to mention, he wrote these stories, and he started with John Lasseter at the whole beginning of Pixar's sort of like growing from the rubble and becoming this ultimate animation studio. He helped create what Toy Story was, the very first CGI animated film ever. So he knows great story. He knows good character, and yet he is not bringing that to the table as how he was just as a filmmaker at Pixar and as leading the whole animation studio, that he should know better to then keep it as that traditionalized. Second of all, and again, I'm not downplaying any person based off of their ethnic backgrounds or what have you, but I will say it doesn't always go by what your ethnic background is if you can handle the fact of knowing what the hell you're doing as a filmmaker, that's all I care about. It's not to say, okay, well, we have to pick this particular person just because of their ethnic background, just so we can make a statement. It's like, you can be this, that, and still be a shitty filmmaker, but you could also be this and that and be a great filmmaker.
Yeah, and this is the thing too when it comes to that diversity, like representation push, is it always kind of stems from this idea that like if you're of a certain nationality or sexuality or whatever, that you're instantly going to find common ground with the same thing. Like, so I'm white, so if a movie about white people, well, obviously I'm going to relate because I'm white too. It's like, no, not really. I listen to a lot of music. A lot of my music I listen to is hip hop, mostly done by Black people. I'm not Black, but I can relate to a lot of the lyrics and things like that. As I mean, you know, I even lately now, believe it or not, I listen to some K-pop. I'm not Korean, last time I checked. But, you know, for me, it's like, I think that you can be Black, white, Hispanic, you know, Asian, whatever, and you can find things that you can relate to just because they don't look like you. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not downplaying representation. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have it. I just think that these Hollywood studios put so much into it. Like if we don't have it, what are Asians going to watch if we don't have an Asian Pixar movie? It's like, come on, you know, it's like, what, they don't like Finding Nemo? They don't, right? It just feels a little bit, they go a little overboard with it, I think, in my opinion. Go ahead, Jay.
Oh, I think that, first of all, the article sounds fantastic. So thanks for sharing that, Dre.
It's very, very good. I'll read a little bit more as we go along.
Okay. My first reaction is that if anybody out there wants to see how the magic of Pixar was made, the closest thing I can tell you about a metaphor for how it was done, and you can read about it in Creativity Incorporated, which is one of the best books that I've ever read from a business perspective. Pixar had a very particular process for the creation of its films. They created a brain trust. The brain trust was in charge of releasing films that everybody in the brain trust would contribute to. So the director was set up as, this is the person responsible for telling the story, and the brain trust is responsible for reviewing whatever that person's doing, whether it's script, whether it's dailies, whether it's new animation, and telling them this is what works and this is what doesn't work for us. The reason Pixar had a leg up in Hollywood was a lot of the same reasons that Walt Disney used to get a leg up in Hollywood. They had a process that was ahead of everyone else's. They could go back and change a sequence in animation late in the game before it was going to come out. So because the way that they structured everything. What it sounds like to me is that, based on this article and based on my own perceptions of the content, that the article is 100% true. Instead of saying we have a brain trust that gives feedback into what the common moviegoer experience is going to be, they let individual directors put their hands on the projects even more so. And the problem with that is, and we talked about this, actually, we were just talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark. Dre was on the show with me talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark, and we said, back in the 1980s, America had far more of a monoculture. And the movies that were made for that monoculture, just being predominant culture that said, like, this is the way that we do things. Fortunately for the world, we've been exposed to more and more subcultures. And that's cool. That's really, really cool. We get a chance to learn about some more of the way that subcultures behave, some more of what's going on in their lives. We get a movie like Everything Everywhere All at Once that explains the immigrant experience and a lot of the trauma that's associated with that, especially in the familial ties. However, somebody has to be, who has their hands on the film, has to step back and say, how do I make this relatable to a wider audience? If I get so specific into a subculture and I start using only the terms that they use or only the experiences that they've had, what you then do is you start to have other people go to see that experience and they go, I don't understand this. I don't understand why I should relate to it. I don't understand. And it doesn't have anything to do with like you guys are saying, it doesn't have anything to do with ethnicity. It could be socioeconomic. If we go out and make a movie about what it's like to be a billionaire, guess what? I don't resonate with that movie, right? Like, I'm not going to walk around being like, I feel really sorry for this billionaire. What a horrible life. So I think what's happening is that Pixar has taken these stories that have always had, not always, but have occasionally had subcultures. I think Encanto is a perfect example. Encanto is all about a subculture of Colombia, and yet it is applicable to the general marketplace because the people involved in making that film understood what about Colombian culture can we showcase for that people will gain an understanding, but what can we also draw people in with their understanding? Well,
Right.
families are pretty crazy. And what's going on with families? A lot of times they have a character who feels like the responsibility for everything's on their shoulders. Then we'll add that character. There's another character who feels like they get lost in the shuffle. We'll add that character. And all of a sudden it goes, that's just like my family. It doesn't matter if they're Colombian. It doesn't matter if they're whatever.
And I'm glad you brought that up because it's the same thing with Coco.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
it's heavily influenced of family, and also to not have your loved ones forgotten, and to remember them, and trying to figure out who you are and how you fit into the world. But yet they wrap that around with the Mexican culture, and that to me, and I'm sorry, for me, Coco was literally the last Pixar film that I felt like that really had that impact of how a typical Pixar film was.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's just really quickly to wrap up what I was saying is like, that's exactly how it feels to watch a Pixar film right now. It feels like Baloney's article is saying, it feels like what's happening is that there's too much of the director's experience and not enough of our collective experience. And that's what we need for the movie to really go outside the bounds of like a few $100 million, right? Which is not bad, but it's not getting into the area where they need to be profitable.
It would be like if Pixar hired me as a director and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to make a movie about a white guy with spiky hair who lives in Southern California who has a Disney YouTube channel, right? It's like, who the fuck? There are like maybe 4 people that's going to relate to that, right? Like
Mr. Cheesy Pop is showing up. I guarantee it.
There you go.
Well, and that's fine if you want to make that film. It just can't be a $200 million film, which, you know, that's the other thing. It's like, okay, if you're going to have, you know, subculture filmmaking, that's fine. It's just, we can't be on this scale. And unfortunately, you know, and Creativity Inc., it's interesting you bring it up, Jay, because this article is actually uses that as like a framework for the entire article. It's really fascinating to see, like, you know, how the details brought out by or the concepts brought out by Ed Catmull are kind of intertwined with Pixar, not just of yesterday but of today, and how that might be a help or a hindrance. But it's like you created this factory for huge filmmaking, right? And it's like you can't now go super hyper specific, like you said. It just doesn't quite work. And actually, Bellany actually brings it up. So if we continue, it also might reflect the disappearance of the monoculture, which has made it harder for any film to catch the zeitgeist. Or as some believe, it might be that the current generation of Pixar filmmakers is just producing films that fewer people find compelling. It happens in creative businesses. You've got the mainstream touch until you don't. And it might be frustratingly hard to explain why or how to fix it. But that's the worst case scenario, that Pixar has lost its magic. And that's kind of, you know, what is necessarily implied but doesn't go all the way in saying, because I think even Bellany himself is you know, doesn't want to come to that conclusion necessarily, and it's quite interesting. And look, it also brings up the fact that, hey, if you want to blame animation, that's fine, but you have an animation company down the road here, you know, obviously making films cheaper but resonating more with the audiences that's gearing towards in terms of box office gross versus how much they actually spend for it. And that too is something where it's like, okay, well, clearly animation is working in some respect. Understand that there's a complaint about originality versus franchise IP and that dynamic, including in animation, and it is brought up in the article. But it's like, hey, look, if you have animated films being made for less, making more, we have a problem.
Well, so go ahead.
Well, I was just saying the real issue too with the whole like, originality is dead, and you have to have a big IP film, is that one of the biggest flops Pixar ever had was Lightyear, which was based on one of their biggest franchises. So that goes down that whole argument is baloney in my opinion. I think that if you baloney. if you make a movie that resonates with the general public, original or not, you know, it's gonna hit. You know, at one point Toy Story was an original idea. Right. I mean, until it wasn't. Right. But I mean, I don't really buy into that whole notion that, like, you know, originality is dead. You got to do a sequel. I don't really buy into that notion. I also don't buy into the notion. And then, Jay, after George gets done, I want to talk to you about this, because I think on Twitter you touched upon it. The idea of like Disney Plus trained families to like that whole thing. We'll talk about that. But George, go ahead. Finish your point, and then we'll.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I have a question for you fellas. Now, this obviously is an Orange Nerd show, so I don't want to kind of dive into the parks, but it kind of ties into this, that Iger set all his time and effort onto Pixar, which essentially had him end the contract with J.K. Rowling to get Potter into the Disney parks back in 2005 before the acquisition of Pixar in 2006. So he kind of gave Potter up to Universal, which essentially pushed them ahead of the game into the parks, so he can focus on the Pixar acquisition. So now here we are 20 some 10, 14, 15, yeah, so almost 20 years later, that now Pixar is starting to kind of fall flat, being that Iger now had his handprint on to the fact of the Pixar acquisition. Could we possibly see, if this trend continues, that he could just kind of drop Pixar in the sense and just merge it with Disney Animation just as one studio, as opposed to just having, this is a Disney animated film and then this is a Pixar film?
Go ahead, Jay. If you want to answer George's question, then also bring up the Disney Plus thing too. I'll let you kick it off.
I think it's a good question, but like, I think it's a really good question, but I don't think it will solve the problem. So here's another way of articulating the problem, and I'm going to use a sports metaphor, which I wish I could think of a parks metaphor to use instead, but I haven't thought of one yet.
Sorry, OG.
yeah. Sorry, OG. Phil Jackson used to run the triangle offense, right? And the triangle offense was a specific type of the triangle offense was a specific type of offense that was made to create strategic advantages against the competition. That was a system that every time you brought the ball down the court, people would do specific things and you would run very specific plays. Now, everybody runs plays, but the triangle offense said you have a role to play, you show up to do that role, and if you go outside of that role, you're throwing off everything, right? And Phil Jackson used that triangle offense to win numerous championships. And you would see the same stars or the same people of star caliber inserting themselves into the triangle audience, they would win. You'd see the same level of players from a different team not have the triangle offense, and they would lose. The point I'm trying to make here is that Pixar, the strategic advantage of Pixar was not necessarily John Lasseter. It was not necessarily Ed Catmull. It was not necessarily Brad Bird. But those were the Kobes and those were the Shaqs put into this triangle offense that went, when you put these people in this offense, you cannot lose. And that is basically what Pixar had. And so basically what I hear it from this and from observation of the films, what it feels like is they said, we're not going to do the triangle offense anymore. We'll still hire good people to come in, but guess what happens when good people come in? Sometimes Kobe goes for 80 points a night, but sometimes Kobe goes for 15 points a night, and you don't always hit, because if it's just up to Kobe, you either win or you lose based on whatever Kobe does. And that's what I think is the bigger problem. So to answer your question specifically, George, now let's say I take a not working system and put it into another place that may or may not have that system. I don't know that it improves anything. Now, the question, the whether or not Iger will do it will depend upon the cost structure. And if Pixar continues to lose money, he may not have an option, because one of the things that Bellany was talking about on his podcast was how expensive it is to run Pixar comparative to how other animation studios are run. And if Disney looks at that and says, we can't keep paying a studio to release movies that don't make money, we have to shrink the campus, essentially, then I could see that becoming, is it a good strategic decision? No, because I don't think that's what the problem is. The problem is they moved away from the model.
Yeah.
Is it something that they'll do? Probably.
because honestly, we're even seeing that just with Disney animation. I mean, look at Strange World. So everything that's coming out of Pixar, Disney Animation's doing the same thing. I'm just wondering if tackle it as just with one studio as opposed to dealing it with two.
It's quite interesting because Bob Iger bought Pixar, not just for the animation factory, right, but for that brain trust and to spread it throughout the company. And now the stalwarts of that brain trust are basically gone, that being Ed Catmull, Steve Jobs, and John Lasseter. It's like, where do we go from here? And I do agree with you, Jay. If you merge the two studios, yeah, it's going to look really good in the balance sheet. Maybe you don't have a choice because of that reason, but it doesn't necessarily solve your problem. It says here in this Spelling article with the heading, Can Pixar be Pixar? Pixar is a close-knit place, both physically and emotionally removed from Hollywood, with an us against the world mentality instilled by Jobs, Lasseter, and Catmull. But insiders say that there's a subtle yet significant change in its culture recently, namely increased oversight and, according to some, interference from Disney, especially after the Lightyear disaster. Budgets are being scrutinized like never before. A few longtime creative stalwarts have defected, like the head of creative development, Mary Coleman, to Locksmith Animation, backed by Liz Murdoch, producer Darley Anderson to Netflix, director Lee Unkrich, and several who joined Lasseter at Skydance. Last month, Pixar was forced to lay off 75 staffers, its first reduction in a decade, and the writing, or in this case the storyboarding, is increasingly on the wall. Soon, Pixar will almost certainly have to share more resources with Disney Animation, a fiscal reality that Lasseter and Catmull would likely have had the juice to avoid. But here's the thing, Doctor doesn't have that juice. But now, not with the box office the way it is. Meanwhile, Pixar has been asked to increase its output to a full-length TV series in the works, Win or Lose, another big-budget series that hasn't been announced yet, but I'm told is based on Inside Out. This is the one we recently heard about, and created by sole writer Mike Jones. All of this shorts for Disney Plus, as well as the usual 1 or 2 films a year, a mix of sequels and originals. It all highlights the paradoxical question facing Pixar. Its entire brand is based on using innovative technology to take the kind of major creative swings needed to break through and create something long-lasting and great. But what if the market no longer supports that model? Does it still make sense to produce $200 million original features like Elemental when the path to profitability these days is far tougher? After all, the other studios, like Universal's Illumination, have figured out how to do it for less money. Can the Disney of 2023 afford that vaunted Pixar culture? The really expensive culture that Catmull believes is the only reason Pixar became Pixar. Is that now an outdated luxury? On the other hand, can Pixar afford not to spend what it spends? Right. Is the new fiscal reality for Disney a recipe for the kind of creative mediocrity and feeding the beast that required Iger to buy Pixar in the first place?
And this is interesting because this was kind of, in my opinion, to quote Thanos, the inevitable. I mean, even the Walt Disney Studios, has gone through these creative slumps several times in its 100-year history. Eventually, Walt Disney was not going to be around. Eventually, that void was going to be there, and they had to fill it. Eventually, people leave. Eventually, you make a flop. These things eventually happen. It was really, in my opinion, a matter of time that it was Pixar was going to see the same issue, and we're just going to have to wait and see if they can pull themselves out of it. Disney has done it many times in the past 100 years. Can Pixar do that? I hope it does. I love Pixar. I'm rooting for Pixar. It's going to be tough, man. We lost a lot of talent, a lot of Kobe's.
It's not to mention a lot of these films between both studios of Disney Animation and Pixar. They all look the same to me. They all have that same type of style. Yeah. It's like the new Pixar film that's going to be coming out. I don't know if I have the name of it. They showed it to us as a sneak preview at the expo. Elio. It's like when I look at that preview that they showed us before Elemental, that it looked like Lightyear and Strange World to me. It's like it's like a constant repeat with these like weird looking alien type things. It's like.
Now I hate to interrupt, but we do have some breaking news actually. And I know I do this and I make a joke, but this is not a joke. Breaking news: Disney's chief diversity officer, Latondra Newton, quits Disney. She exits.
That's interesting.
So
that's interesting. She's been a very controversial figure.
Yep. So just over the wire. So I just want to let you guys know that before.
That's the one
continue.
that was just promoted, right, from ESPN.
No.
She was the diversity and equity Reimagine Tomorrow group, which is interesting because we hear from a lot of.
I'm thinking of HR. I'm thinking of the HR person. Yeah.
Yeah, the HR person.
So apparently, even her, she thinks tomorrow's very bleak.
Yeah, right.
Her role is really interesting because she was second to only Iger himself.
Right, and we keep hearing from people, that Disney's not changing course. Well, clearly they're moving away from the woke, as they call it, because this is a big signal. And this isn't even the first big firing. I mean, when they start these layoffs, that division was one of the first to get cut, according to.
And that's why I still have high hopes as far as like for the studio portion goes, because as you had mentioned, OG, a lot of the stuff that we're seeing now was already in the pipeline 5, 6, 7 years ago. So of what is going on now, we will then see probably within the next several years moving forward. It's just kind of flushing it all out.
Yes, exactly. Jay, I wanted to follow up with you again, like with the Disney Plus thing. So you had a conversation on Twitter. You were watching some John Campea about how the families were trained to like not see Pixar movies. Do you want to go ahead and elaborate on that and your viewpoint on that? Because I think that's a very interesting kind of direction of the conversation. Because that seems to be a narrative right now that like Chapek, like basically this is Chapek's doing. He kind of ruined Pixar because he released 3 movies on Disney Plus.
Yeah. Well, and if you go back in time, right, like it was not Chapek who said that streaming was going to be the most important thing for the Walt Disney Company. It was actually Iger, right? Prior to. Absolutely. Chapek was trying to carry that strategy out, which is why he put a lot of emphasis on Disney Plus during his tenure. That made a lot of sense when the parks were shut down. So like it's easy to it's really easy for people to pick and choose what they want to blame people for. Obviously, that's what Twitter is for. But the thing that I found really fascinating about that comment specifically is that we've been trained to only watch things on streaming. It doesn't seem to hold weight though, right? Like it doesn't seem to communicate to us what it sounds like when you say something like that is that the quality of Pixar films was never quite good enough for theatrical release, and that we all would have just waited for them to be free for us on Disney Plus, and that's why the only way we would have watched them. But if you start breaking it down, like it doesn't make a lot of sense. Some of the comparisons that I was making to this one, as I was just saying, like my tweet actually says, I think the blame can be placed squarely on the focus of the Disney Corporation at the time of these show releases. So when you start to see what was released on Disney Plus, what you start to see is a very sporadic quality to all of the different shows. Right. And in my opinion, what people respond to more or less is that they respond to there is an undercurrent of like positivity. Let's face it, John Lasseter brought a level of positivity. He was out in front of the camera. I don't remember the last time I saw Pete Docter like talking about anything. Lasseter was always out. He was out at the parks. He was out here. He was out there. He was talking about how great Pixar was. He has a flashy shirt so that you could remember who he was. But so there's this undercurrent of like, what do we like? What should we be focused on? The country's sort of divided. We're going back into an election year. It makes this like we're looking for things that are high quality. We're searching for things that are high quality. And if you don't bring that high quality, then it's very obvious right at the bat. You're like, okay, well, this sucks now. So, and once you get on that negative train, it's hard to get off that negative train. But what I was saying on Twitter in terms of the quality is that when Chapek made the decision to just fully greenlight as much as possible for Disney Plus, he put pressure on the creatives to develop content faster. And I don't think that's ever good pressure to have on the creative agencies, is to do things as fast as possible. And so for me, it was more about Disney saying, let's focus on the growth of Disney Plus and then what that did to the quality, as opposed to us saying, no, I think people are just waiting for things to come out on streaming now. The reality is that when Encanto came out on streaming, it was one of the most popular movies on streaming, but it also had a theatrical release where everybody showed up to see it. Well, Encanto's release wasn't as good in that regard, but
that's not. It didn't have that great of
maybe not a good example.
But no, it did resonate though. It resonated with audiences, even though it didn't necessarily make that much money.
Speaking of Encanto, let me ask you fellas this: if Encanto was released this year, where do you think it would lie? Do you think it would be just as successful as it was on the streaming service, or do you think it would have became sort of kind of like that? I don't want to say like that Frozen type of, but I mean, Frozen was like a completely like phenomenon in the theater. Do you think Encanto would have had that repeat if it was released, say, in 2023?
It's interesting. If it had elementals release window, I think it's a $600-800 million film because of
Right.
the lack of competition. Go ahead, OG.
No, I agree. And Disney in general does very well with musicals. And we'll get into that in a second with Wish. But Disney does very well with musicals. I think that movie resonated with people. They gave it they gave it a chance when it went on to Disney Plus, and they really, really liked it a lot. And the music is what really keeps fueling it, like it did with Frozen and all that stuff. I think this movie, I completely agree with you, Dre. I think it would have done very well in theaters. Very, very well if released today.
And I'm going to double down on that a little bit, because if the pandy had not happened, Lin-Manuel Miranda was at peak Lin-Manuel Miranda in 2019 with the success of Hamilton. I think it could have hit $1 billion, to be honest with you, because if we rewound it, if we release it today, it's different. Lin-Manuel is like, he's not as popular as he was because a lot of his shows were live shows and stuff like that. Yep. But I'm saying, like, if it had released and there was not a pandemic, I think that film had all that it needed to have legs. People would have seen it multiple times. They would have taken their kids. All Disney would have to do is release the sing-along version. They could sell more. And I'll
even triple down on that, Jay. And it's because you mentioned Lin-Manuel Miranda, that even prior to 2019 with Hamilton, he also did the soundtrack for Moana, and Moana was very big even in the theater with the soundtrack and even on Disney Plus, because I think for a period of time, Moana, if you looked at the numbers of how many times it was viewed, it was in like the top 5 tier, I believe, as far as
and Encanto,
watching time.
I believe shares a lot of that space with Moana in the top 10 month to month via Nielsen for the streaming minutes watched. So yeah, I mean there's a strong chance that had the pandemic never happened, and that Lin-Manuel Miranda being at the high that he was, and remember Disney Plus put Hamilton on and so forth, and I'm sure that would have drawn more people and eyeballs towards Encanto. That I mean it would have been a smashing success, I think, for sure.
I want to pivot. Well, actually, not even pivot. We're still on the topic of like Pixar and Disney animation, but it seems like fans are really putting all their eggs in the Wish basket, so to speak. Right? Oh, well, just wait till Wish comes out. That's going to change everything. And look, I'm super excited for Wish. I am. I've made no bones about it. I'm a fairy tale storybook kind of guy when it comes to Disney animation, but I have major concerns. So I'm going to preface this with.
You need people like me so you can point your fucking finger and say, that's the bad guy.
I'm going to be the bad guy right now. Because I have a lot of concerns with Wish. Number one, from what we understand, it's going to kind of explain away the wishing star that has been used in many Disney animated films, right? They're going to try to explain that and give it a backstory. That's a very risky move, in my opinion, because you mess that up and now you taint these other films that's connected to it with the star. So if you don't nail that story and people don't like it, it kind of changes your perception of these other movies. Really risky thing. It's also coming off a little meta to me. I feel like this is the 100th anniversary Disney animated film. From what I understand, there's like cameos and like it's just I'm getting the meta energy from this thing a little bit, and I'm not a meta fan.
And especially with the preview, I mean, they're really setting this up where they're saying this is a century in the making, and then they give you all the films, like the studio that brought you The Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, Cinderella, Pinocchio, Fantasia. They're like running down every film. I mean, you're tying this film to, as you mentioned, OG, to every single animated film that was part of Disney animation. So yeah, if you fail that, this could be a tremendous success, which would be great, and I hope it is, because I'm actually looking forward to Wish. But if it is a financial flop, then yeah, I mean, it's just like how Iger had mentioned, like how he mentioned the live action Little Mermaid, this is like going to be the spearheading the studio moving forward. Well, now he's kind of eating crow on that one, because look at the numbers. So again, if this happens with an animated film that's tying back to how the studio even became successful with Disney's folly of a Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, they're shooting themselves in the foot.
Well, and Star Wars does this all the time. It's like when they try to explain away how Han got his last name with Solo and all that.
Oh boy.
You run a major risk when you try to do this stuff, and I'm really, really skeptical. Go ahead, Dr. Dre.
If you have if you in the marketing, if you say, hey, this is the studio that brought you this, right? Now brings you this, I think it's fun because nobody really, remembers marketing material that that often, doesn't necessarily taint the product. But if you now featured in the work itself, now we have issues, right? And look, we've seen how let's say like the metaverse for like Marvel or something like that, how it's like, it's gotten them into trouble. Let's say, do we want to duplicate those potential downsides or troubles with Disney animation now? And look, this I think goes back to like people having their like little fan theories about, this is, like Tarzan's relating to Elsa and Anna because, they were on the boat and they like got, all that kind of stuff. You've heard these kind of fan theories about that these, all these studio films are interconnected, right? Well, now you might be on the cusp of a film actually doing that. And is that the best idea? I'm just not sure about that. So to your point, I am worried. Now, George, to your point, this does look different than any Disney or Pixar animated release that I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I personally feel like, I think that may be going a little bit too far. I don't mind like little subtle Easter eggs, like how they have the magic carpet in The Princess and the Frog, or if they have the lamp in Moana, or Rapunzel and Flynn Rider show up for Elsa's coronation day. That's fine. It's like very subtle things. It's like they're there. Can you find them? But like when you basically hone in that it becomes the main core of the storyline, it's like, okay, you're maybe biting off a little more than you could chew.
What do you think? What do you think, Jay?
Well, so first thing I'll say is anybody who thinks that they can predict what movies are going to do at the box office in 2023, good luck, man. I have no clue how you predict what's going to. The question I've been asking on Twitter, and people sometimes don't understand what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, if you were a studio exec, how would you know what to greenlight? How would you know, based on what's happening in 2023, what to greenlight? Because it's very confusing. I'm not asking you, how can you tell if something is successful or not successful? If there's data, you can go look at data. Like, that's fine. There's no data to tell you what you should do. Now, when it comes to Wish and what Wish is trying to do, the two things that I can say are, if it's like World of Color 1, it's going to flop. And if it's like Wondrous Journeys, it's going to soar. And it's going to come down to that. Like, if you're going to put your feet if you're going to put your feet in, dip your toes into that kind of nostalgic water, so to speak, terrible metaphor. But if you're going to do that, then it better be like Wondrous Journeys. Because if it's like World of Color 1, people are going to go, I guess, but I would have rather gone on a ride during that time, right? Like, so to me, that's what it's all going to come down to, because I think nostalgia can be used effectively, but we've seen time and time again that when it's, so I'll give you a perfect example. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, not used well. It did not use nostalgia well. But what did use nostalgia well? No Way Home. Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yes.
Killed it. It killed
it.
So it just depends on how they're going to incorporate those things into that story. It better be a good story, and it better make you feel some things. But I'm not going to be able to predict how it's going to perform, because this year's crazy.
Is Wish for you? Oh, sorry, fellas, I got the hype train there.
Did I drop it? Should I drop you with a track switch, George?
Yeah, might as well.
Come on.
Oh no! I must have hit that track switch.
There we go.
Mickey, come on.
But Jay, is Wish something that grasps your attention that you would want to see that in theaters? Because you had mentioned earlier that, you could only see so many, films in a theater. You have to kind of pick and choose. That's what a lot of people are doing. Based off what is shown so far, is that something that is on your agenda to go see? Or is it something that's like, I'll wait till it comes out on streaming?
So there's only currently 2 franchises that I can say I'm for sure showing up to the theater for their newest release. Marvel has dropped off that list. I'm not showing up to a Marvel movie until I hear whether or not people like it first. And so I'm using critics' reviews primarily, but also some of the reviews that we're seeing from, I'll call them critics, but not like, they're not like the Rolling Stones of the world or their varieties, but they're
Sure.
YouTubers or whatnot. So MCU has dropped off that list. Pixar has dropped off that list, obviously, because I'm not showing up to see Elemental. 2 franchises and then several directors. The first one is I will be at Oppenheimer because Christopher Nolan. I'm a huge Christopher Nolan fan, so I'll be at Oppenheimer. But the only other 2 franchises that still have me at whatever they make, I'll show up for, are Star Wars. They're losing me, but so far I'm there. I've not watched some of the Disney Plus stuff, but I have watched a lot of the stuff, and Indiana Jones. And Indiana Jones, quite frankly, is losing me too. So those are the only 2 franchises that I say I'm for sure showing up for. And then the director, I'm for sure showing up for is Christopher Nolan. Outside of that, I look at a film like Wish and I go, if it's rated well, if you guys tell me that it's good, I'll go see it. Otherwise, I'm probably not buying a ticket.
I want to apologize for the phone call there. I had my little track switch problem.
It was probably Bob Iger. If you want to take it on live.
Yeah, exactly. It's about Latondra Newton. Give me a second, guys.
What should I do with Pete Doctor?
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about Pete here for just a second here. If we want to have, we're distributing pink slips here. Sorry, but when it comes to franchises, I think you're right, Jay. I mean, I think people are being a lot more choosy with what they actually go see, and frankly, this summer I've already seen Guardians of the Galaxy. That was my number 1 right there. Number 2, I've got tickets right now for Mission Impossible. And then Oppenheimer. That's it. That's the only movies I plan on seeing this summer. And even Oppenheimer might not happen because, well, George, we're going to be a little bit busy this summer. I don't know if you noticed. OG, you're going to be into that fun as well. But yeah, I mean, Wish, man, I'm going to have to take the wait and see on this one because I just don't know. It's just whenever is something coming, whenever something is coming out from Disney, it just seems like can't catch a break no matter what studio actually fulfills it. And it's really, really unfortunate. And I just don't know. Like you said, Jay, for Wish, it'll have to be a story that is propping up maybe some things that might happen, but the story first, right? It can't be the nostalgia propping up the story like we saw maybe with Flash, right? With Michael Keaton and and Ezra Miller. It's like, yeah, Michael Keaton's the best part of that movie. Of course he is, because Ezra simply can't it can't carry a movie. It's as unfortunate a reality as that may be. You talked about, Jay, quality and so forth, and how much we're actually spending on these films, and the wild swings that we've had when it comes to the releases of these things, whether for streaming or otherwise. Bellany calls it feeding the beast, and I think Catmull talks about it too. It's interesting. OG, I don't want to sidestep our conversation here, but I want to bring this up just for a second. If you want to share my screen.
Yeah, I got you.
Talking about Christine McCarthy right here. This is from the Wall Street Journal.
Oh, I thought that was Jerry from Succession for a second.
There you go, right? Yeah. It might as well be, right? We know that there's some allegories there for sure. But Disney finance chief clashed with top executives before stepping down. Company says Christine McCarthy is taking a family medical leave, but move catches associates by surprise. It's interesting. We were looking for more information on this story when we actually heard about it, because we literally went live that day, and now we're talking about Latondra Newton, which we'll get into in a moment, I guess, on an already full show full of interesting surprises. But it talks about here how McCarthy has clashed with Disney chief executive Robert Iger and other top executives over strategy, including the amount of money Disney spends on content and a recent restructuring that she felt didn't go far enough to streamline the company, the person familiar with the matter said. I'll tell you this, Jay, and I don't know how you feel about this. Bob Iger's talked about how we're going to make less content, but it's going to be quality, right? And the example that I bring up is, okay, if you have let's say you have $10 billion, right? Instead of producing 10 things, each $100 billion, you can produce maybe like 4 things at $200 billion a piece. And now you've spent less money, and maybe the quality has improved since then. But, you know, McCarthy's like, hey, we got to streamline more. And Iger's like, we don't necessarily need to streamline that much. With all the things going on, you know, in your opinion, Jay, which strategy do you think is best right now, if a strategy could be taken away from how 2023 has gone?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So if it were me and you said you're now in charge of Disney entertainment and content, which no one's going to do, by the way, but if they said that to me, the first thing that I would want to do is I would want to say, okay, what are some stories that we already have in our binder of storytelling that we know are going to be killer stories, right? That we can just release, that we know that they'll make money. We can spend $200 million on those, right? Then I would also go out there and I would say, we need to be testing the waters with new content. And in order to do that effectively, we need to go back to the early days of Pixar and build fast, fail fast, improve on what we were putting out. And then when it gets to theaters, it's a solid product for less money. So I think we need to have smaller budgets. We need to be very strategic with the way that we're using our budgets. If we see a film like Turning Red that is highly nuanced into a particular subculture, it gets a lower budget, but we go through the full process with it. We try to make it as good as possible. We release it. If it starts to go gangbusters, maybe that gets a sequel. Maybe we move to the next thing. What I think is happening with a lot of these studios is that they're almost like the magic of Pixar, if you read Creativity Incorporated, was that they didn't have to do what most films have to do, which is have a screenwriter hand off the script to a director and a whole crew of people, and then they go make stuff, and then you see the end result, and you go, well, we can only do a few reshoots, but that we can't. I mean, this is a terrible product to begin with. Pixar came in and said, we can adapt on the fly at any point in time in our process to put out the best possible content. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of the things we're seeing today, they feel like they didn't go through that kind of like learn and fail process. It just looks like people had confidence and they put it out, and it's like
they're fitting the beast.
And that's why Lasseter brought on Brad Bird for The Incredibles, because he feared that they were going to repeat themselves. And Brad Bird came in, he brought his animation crew from the Iron Giant, and it was like the Pixar crew started relearning stuff again from when they graduated from Cal Arts, and it was like it changed the game. And it's like, where is that tenacity? Where is that oomph to want to put out great storytelling?
Well, it seems like you're given a window, and it's like you got to hit that window. You got to hit that window no matter what, and yes, you better hit it. And you have Pete Docter, who I don't think he's a Lasseter or even a Jobs type guy who's going to be like, "Hey, this sucks, can't do it, gotta axe this." We got to put something out. I think he's just like, okay, well, if that's the story you want to tell. Okay, well, let's go ahead. You really believe in it? Let's go forward. And it's like, yeah, but we're doing this with $200 million film product here. Like, these are big slates. We have huge promotional pushes, right? We'll get into the Flash's promotional push and why it's even a more uphill battle for that movie. But when it comes to Pixar, to posit the theories as detailed by at Catmull in Creativity Inc., you have to have somebody who pushes back and says, this is just not good enough. And right now, I don't think that person exists, not only just in Pixar, but everywhere at Disney. And that is really, really disturbing to think about.
Well, and in regards to Pete Docter, and I think I mentioned this to you on the phone, Dre, like he's a brilliant creative, but he doesn't have that leadership quality. Like you said the perfect thing, like just a minute ago, when you said like when he won't say that something sucks. Oh, if you believe in it, let's go with, like, that's totally him. That's not a leadership quality. You have to be able to be, oh man, I don't have my drop. You have to be the bad guy.
You need people like me.
You gotta have the bad guy in the room willing to say, "Look, this movie's not working. It's getting cut."
Honestly, what you're saying, OG, basically your balls have to drop before they hit the wall.
Right, exactly. You know, he doesn't have that leadership. He just doesn't. He's a creative mind, but he's not a leader. And they need someone in there that can lead and to kind of have that oomph and say, look, that ain't working. We got to do something else, you know. And unfortunately, he's not the guy. He's kind of a little timid in that regard, I think.
If anybody wants to get an idea about this, Creativity Inc. is a great book in which to read.
It is.
Just like Jay said, but also the Pixar story by Leslie Iwerks. You know, before she did the Imagineering story, she did that, and it is absolutely phenomenal. Check it out wherever you can see it. I don't even know where you can see it.
It's on Disney Plus.
It's on Disney Plus. Okay,
yes.
Watch that because that will give you a sense of just how, you know, how that process kind of matures and what you have to do, what kind of leader you have to be in order to incorporate that process.
And honestly, that's something that they could do with the Disney Plus, with the streaming service. Like, that was the whole point of the whole entire platform, was they said they have so much Disney history, they have so much in the vault that everything practically is going to end up on that streaming service. I have yet to see any more classic, original, historic content coming out of the vault that's being placed on Disney Plus.
It's interesting you say that, George, because there's some disturbing things, and I'm hearing about that too. For example, the archives or the archivists who have been around for decades are getting whittled away, from what I understand, within these kind of big cuts that we're hearing about, which has a lot of people kind of on edge, like, ooh, is the company, you know, maybe accidentally or purposefully forgetting its history and minimizing that segment of the company and looking to maybe dispose of it and move on to a new era. Leonard Maltin actually gave an interesting, hosted some live stream in which he was asked about the Disney Treasures series. Remember those Disney Treasures DVD series that they put out? And he was just like, yeah, you know, when I presented the idea to Dick Cook to produce these Disney Treasures series, they were very, very successful. And then when Dick Cook was fired, there go Disney Treasures, you know, and all those tins and those films haven't been put on Disney Plus or haven't been done with, you know, they haven't been used in any capacity. And he was quite aggravated about that.
To be fair, though, the other day, they did announce that they're going to debut 28 newly restored Disney Animation Studios classic shorts to celebrate Disney's 100th, and that will be put on Disney Plus. So to be fair, I mean, we have to acknowledge that they are. I mean, 28. That's a significant amount, and
that's good. No, and that's absolutely fantastic. Animated shorts are great to put out, but man, there's been so much content, to George's point, that hasn't been put out. I mean, we're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of specials, documentaries, shows, whatever, that just haven't been put out. So 28,
even still films.
It's great,
even still films. Like, there's still a lot of classic Disney films that still haven't hit the service yet.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Now, should we tackle the Flash a little bit, and then we'll talk a little Latondra?
Absolutely, yes.
Let's tackle the Flash, because this is an interesting thing going on here. And Jay, I know that, again, to go back to Twitter, I know you've been seeing a lot of the stuff online about they should fire James Gunn now or something because of it. I mean, it's insane, absolutely insane. Like, I talk a lot about on this channel about, like, content has a delay, and a lot of people on the conservative side don't really understand this either, I think, because you see a lot of people like, well, Little Mermaid's woke, so Bob Iger's not changing. Little Mermaid is a product of 2018, 2019 getting released today. There's a lag. The Flash is a lag. This is pre-David Zaslav, you guys. This is like way before James Gunn. I mean, this has nothing to do with any failure on Gunn's part, in my opinion. Go ahead, Dre.
Well, it brings up some interesting questions, and there are some things that, like, are obvious to maybe our mind. OG, I'm sure, having seen the movie, it's obvious to your mind, but there are some things that I didn't really think about that are changing the industry as we speak. So here we go. There are a lot of lessons to be learned this weekend, but chief among them is what it's like for a major motion picture studio to open a movie with a number of its cast, primarily its main star, not available to do press. That was a big looming question, which was on everybody's minds in the wake of Ezra Miller's tabloid-laden 2020 through 2022 in regards to Warner Brothers DC's $200 million The Flash. Trust me, folks, that number, that 200 million number, that's a lot lower than it should be, and we'll get to that in a moment. And now we have our answer as the pick is opening to $55.1 million over 3 days and $64 million over the 4-day Juneteenth holiday weekend at 4,234 theaters, below Warner Brothers' $70 to $75 million 3-day projections. 3-day projections just kept losing speed for this Andy Muschietti directed movie. Should the movie have gone straight to Warner Brothers streaming service Max? Absolutely not. They need to make as much money as they can, and that's through Windows. But it talks about right here with the SAG-AFTRA strike authorization in place, should talks go sideways and actors not permitted to do press in those situations, the studio, streamers, etc. may want to think twice before playing notorious hardball, and this is what happens when your cast isn't available to promote a major motion picture. Already San Diego Comic-Con is in check with the unavailability of TV series actors, which might be the reason why Marvel pulled out of Hall H recently, as we just heard about today. Warner's didn't lean on Miller for the Flash press tour, the star making his first Hollywood appearance post legal troubles at the Monday night premiere of The Flash, which was limited to a red carpet photo call, not video or press interviews, except for a couple of bloggers. But a majority of the cast weren't available for 360 degrees press that we hear. So it talks about how, where are these stars that we're supposed to make up the cameos and the appearances for this movie? They just weren't available. Late nights, gaggles that you would do, that wasn't available. Yeah. And it also goes on to say that they may have made up for the losses of those outlets by paying a lot in terms of ads to get the word out. Warner spent big on trailers, iSpot, which monitors what studios shell out on U.S. TV spots. And again, this is just one of the facets that the Flash's overall marketing campaign expense shows Warner shelling out $31.3 million in TV spots for the Miller movie, which pulled in about 1 billion impressions. That's more in iSpot metrics than what Disney spent on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, $24.3 million, Elemental, $12 million, and what Paramount spent on Transformers Rise of the Beast, $17 million, 3 times more than what Sony spent on Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. That is a huge marketing spend right there. We're hearing that it's high. These expenses, Zazzy went big. He went big, thinking that the star power combined with Ben Affleck, Michael Keaton, you've got appearances by all kinds of people at the end there. Even Wonder Woman makes an appearance. In one case, you don't get just one, but 2 Ezras. Hey, you're thinking that you're gonna bring bodies into the theater. Well, sadly, that is not the case.
And as someone who's seen the movie, the 2 Ezras is not a selling point. I'll tell you that much.
That's why I said facetiously. He can't carry a film, for what I understand. And the problems with Ezra get exponentially worse when you add 2 Ezras. It's just he's a really funny sidekick, and unfortunately, it just wasn't enough to carry the entire film. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to give this to Critical Drinker because he made this point. But sometimes it's fate, right? We kind of knew just from everything that was going around. OG, we talked about this on the show quite a bit with Ezra's troubles, with DC kind of on the downslope. James Gunn looking to reimagine it, that there was really no chance for this movie and that no amount of effort could alter the fate of this movie. Well, it's actually the theme of the movie itself, that no matter what you do, you just kind of have to go along with the fate of maybe certain characters. Well, unfortunately, that turns out to be true in both instances.
The issue, though, and I agree on that, but the issue is it wasn't even like they just okay, we got it. We got to push through. It was like, this is the best superhero movie of all time. It's like you set the expectations way up here in the movie. I can tell you, if you guys haven't seen it yet, it does not come close to that at all. And it's like they oversold it, way oversold it.
So if you really want my answer to that question. Am I interested in The Flash? Do I want to go see The Flash? Give me a second. No.
There you go. Yeah, there
Exactly.
you go.
Exactly.
And George, I'm not as exciting as you. While it looks like I'm drinking a beer, I'm actually drinking an O'Doul's. Like a non-alcoholic. I'm it's conservatives. It's not Bud Light though. It's not Bud Light.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Gee, you said 45 minutes. You were kind of squirming in
Yeah.
your seat because you were like, I don't know how I'm going to make it through this. But it did have a saving grace near the second half, right?
Yeah. The Michael Keaton stuff was fantastic. I love Michael Keaton in this movie, and I was actually a little worried about it because he's not a spring chicken. You know what I'm saying? He's getting up there in age, and he handled it. He absolutely handled it. I would love to see Michael Keaton be the official Batman from here on out. Like, forget Patterson and Affleck and all them. Just have Michael Keaton do it.
I
He
mean,
did
Michael
phenomenal.
Keaton was honestly one of my favorite Batmans of all time as far as in cinema goes. And I think he also did a phenomenal job as Vulture in Spider-Man Homecoming. It's like, when and he also the critically acclaimed Birdman. So, I mean, like Michael Keaton, I mean, he's done some pretty decent work. And honestly, I think, despite, how he's up there, I still think that he could bring bodies to the seats.
Yeah.
This is why a lot of people are kind of interested in Batgirl, because Michael Keaton apparently was going to be a pivotal figure in that feature, kind of taking on the kind of, if anybody's seen Batman Beyond, that kind of animated series where you follow a future Bruce Wayne, he's maturing a new Batman for a new generation. It was kind of going to take that same kind of arc right there, but with Batgirl. It's a very kind of interesting prospect. Jay, Michael Keaton enough to get you to the theater?
No. or as I'll say with George.
Oh, there you go.
No. No, he's not enough. He's not enough to get me to the theater. But I noticed something really, really fascinating. Dre, if you share your screen again,
I got
look at the number 4 story on there.
The number 4
That number 4 story on the trending on Deadline is really surprising to me. So if you scroll up a little bit on the right hand side of the page,
Ryan Murphy
leaving Netflix in talks to return to Disney. That is not a sign of moderation. Can we just point that out real quick? Ryan Murphy is very famous for pushing the boundaries of a lot of what people would refer to as woke content. So that's really fascinating to me. I wonder if that's actually going to be something that they'll close on or not. We'll see.
Yeah, that is interesting. I did not know that about him. Now I know he did the Dahmer series for Netflix, and I've said it many times on the channel. I love that show.
Yeah, everything he's done is not. I shouldn't say everything he's done is woke, but I mean, I believe he was the guiding force behind Glee. I believe he was the guiding force behind Hollywood that came out on Netflix earlier. Again, I'm not making a statement on the content. Most of his content is received, I think, really, really well, but it is not necessarily a sign that they are moderating. So that'll be really interesting to see how that is.
I heard about that Ryan Murphy story, and I was wondering, what kind of creative we're getting here. Dahmer was a very interesting story. He made huge waves on Netflix, but Ryan Murphy, from what I understand, had his history with Disney originally. Then went over to Netflix. Now is coming back. It's gonna be really interesting to see what that's all about right there. I think Bob Iger's in a real tough position when it comes to moderation with the company, because obviously they have played to an audience that now expects a certain, let's say, initiative from Disney going forward, right? I even saw an article the other day. Hey, Elemental continues Pixar's gender and queer problems. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. What is this all about? What they were detailing was it didn't go far enough, right? There was certain expectations made that they felt that weren't satisfied or fulfilled in the film. But then you have completely opposite side of the spectrum that's like, we want this removed entirely, and is, I would say, more sensitive to the ideas and themes in these movies that just frankly they haven't been as sensitive to before. For example, right, Elemental, one of the big to-dos about it, I guess, is that it's supposed to be this kind of kind of foreigner love relationship, you know, and it's supposed to be about what a kind of not only just an interrelational relationship, but you know, this kind of what do you want to say?
It's basically Inside Out meets Pocahontas. I guess that's like kind of like that. It's like two people from two different worlds that aren't supposed to be together, that they find common ground of how they could become together, and because they're two different elements, they change their chemistry.
Right, but I get that, and that sounds pretty good right there. But some people were, you know, they were detailing it in such a way that it was like a what do you want to say? A kind of film that kind of, I don't know.
Don't get canceled, Dre. Don't get canceled. Come on, buddy.
Yeah, so like migration, or like what is the word? I can't think of it right now because I'm camera, of course. But it's just it's got some more progressive themes, let's say, that people were highlighting. But it was interesting because it was like, well, if this film came out like 6 years ago, nobody's saying anything about it at all. And yet it's a thing now because people are a little bit more sensitive to it. That's kind of my overall point here. So it's like, what does Bob Iger do in that situation?
Well, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, I'm just going by just like of what I've seen. Like there were certain instances of the movie where you can kind of see like some of the agenda, but the overall storyline, it was like Ember's relationship with her father, of how she didn't want to disappoint the family and taking over the family business, and then her relationship with Wade, and it's like, could it be possible, this and that, and then the story within herself of like why she is the way she is with her temper and what have you. So it's like, so I can't really say the film as a whole was, I can't really say that as a whole that it shows as woke. There are certain instances within the film.
It was like, I guess they were saying it was pro-immigration or something, and it was like, well, that's not necessarily, you know.
See, I didn't. But here's the thing. I mean, I could understand bringing that up because it was like the fire moving to a different place and everything, to a new land, trying to find their way. Right. But I mean, it wasn't where it was like completely that essentially like thrown in your face within the story. Like it was part of the story, but it wasn't where that was like kind of thrown in your face.
Just having like an interracial relationship, and I haven't seen the movie, full disclosure, but just having an interracial relationship, in my opinion, that doesn't constitute woke.
And that's why I brought up it was kind of like a hybrid of Inside Out meets Pocahontas, because with the story of Pocahontas, with the main character and John Smith, they come from two different worlds, and it's like she can't be with him because of this reason, he can't be with her because of this reason. And yeah, so I mean, as I said, the film as a whole, I really didn't have a problem with it. I think actually it kind of is stepping in the right direction. As I said, there's still some subtle things that I wish that they didn't put in there, but because again, this is a film that's been in production for how long, obviously it's going to be in there. But I mean, compared to Strange World, Lightyear, and Turning Red, I would take Elemental any day.
George, though, as a fellow Italian, surely your favorite is Luca, right?
Oh, of course, yes. I actually, and not to sound biased, I actually enjoyed Luca. I thought that was, I thought that was a very,
really cute movie.
The story, the characters, even the look of it. It had this very distinct look that you haven't really seen in another Pixar film, and I enjoyed Luca.
Yeah. And Luca was there was talk about Luca being somewhat woke at the time because it was about the possibility of those two characters being gay and having a love story. And here's the thing: I'll use this as a jumping off point to get back to the comment I was going to make about Ryan Murphy too. Is that I can't stand the complaints about things being woke because people don't understand what they mean when they say it, right? So what they do is they go, I was uncomfortable with these elements and I didn't like the story, therefore it was woke. If you were uncomfortable with the elements but love the story, you would probably come out of that movie going, I really enjoyed it. Like Across the Spider-Verse, for example, right? So I think that there's this thing that happens with storytelling. We were talking about this the other day. my version of storytelling versus propaganda is that storytelling assesses all the different viewpoints that could exist about a topic and deals with them. Propaganda just shoves something in your face that says this is the only way to think about this,
Right?
and you should think about it this way. And I think that the difference here is what we're talking about content that's made for general audiences versus content that's made for maybe more niche audiences. And I think about that in the context of, I think that if Glee was running right now, the Ryan Murphy series Glee, about the high school student Glee Club, I think that a lot of people would be boycotting that and yelling about how woke it was. But it was a super popular, well-received show for the general audience. It played on network TV when it was released. And I counter that with what I think is going on there is the storytellers are doing a really good job of helping people who don't understand a progressive idea understand it by telling stories in such a way that other people can gravitate toward them, right? I contrast that with his series Hollywood. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Hollywood on Netflix at all. It's predominantly about a group of people from marginalized communities trying to make it in Hollywood. So there's gay characters, there's characters of color. They're all trying to make it in Hollywood. And I had a conversation with a screenwriter friend of mine, and I go, I don't understand this show at all, because there's a lot of conflict in the first 3 episodes, and from then on out, all the characters just win everything and they get all the awards. And it's like, from a storytelling perspective, it makes no sense. It's like you spent like 1 act saying how terrible Hollywood was, and then you spent the rest act 2 and act 3. It's just how easy it is in Hollywood. I couldn't understand it. And he said to me, he goes, well, what you don't understand is that's a lot of wish fulfillment, people wishing Hollywood had been like that. Basically what he's telling me is that story really wasn't for you, Jay. That story, because you would go, I don't understand it. But what that was wish fulfillment for a specific niche that went, man, it's hard for me today and I could use some encouragement. And that's what that series was for. And I think that the complaints nowadays are they're all over the map, because because people don't really understand what the complaints are, and their first thing they can go to is woke. And it's just a little bit ridiculous at this point.
It is. And then if you took a movie like the original trilogy in Star Wars, when Leia comes out and says, how many times I got to save your skin, boys, or something like that, right? I'm not quoting her exactly. If they had anything like that in a movie nowadays, woke, oh, look at her, they would rake Disney over the coals with that, and it's like, so yeah, you're right, Jay. There is this thing now where it's like, I think people are hypersensitive. Like any woman who's like a badass now, it's woke almost, right?
Yep, exactly.
Right. So it's like our stories featuring that going to be palatable to the kind of 4-quadrant budgeted storytelling that Disney wants to make, and that's a really kind of interesting question, right? And how far do you go, and you rein it in? It's all. And now obviously the Oscars have changed their let's say the qualifications in terms of, and that's got a lot of people talking about it like, well, is that going too far? Are you changing the art and so forth? And are you having an effect on art that it normally wouldn't have without this? And it's just all kinds of interesting questions. But for Iger right now, it's like, what do I do, to kind of turn this ship around? I honestly do not know, because this is tough. And, just looking at The Flash, The Flash, nobody would think that's woke. I don't think there's not too many woke elements. I wouldn't say. OG, no. Do you see anything?
No.
Okay.
No. There was nothing in there that really sticks out off the top of my head that I would say is woke, to be honest.
Right. And that didn't, perform well. Obviously, it's not necessarily a golden rule, but for as many people are saying, oh well, Disney's dying because of woke. Well, it's like, well, that film wasn't woke necessarily, but it still failed. I think there's just just films just not resonating with audiences right now for any one reason or another. And I think, and I think in Disney's case, and if we want to bring woke into it, I do think there are some creators who are focusing on, like you said, subculture type elements, right, or personal stories that necessarily don't, speak to the human condition. for what these 4-quadrant films are meant for, or at least budgeted for. I'll say that. And I think you have some creatives who are putting emphasis on certain themes at the expense of story, not the theme kind of being beneficial to the story, if that makes sense. So
Absolutely.
it's tough.
And using that as a segue, Dre, this is something that I wondered about when we just saw OG. You had the breaking news, right? The head of diversity and inclusion is stepping down.
Right.
Pete Docter said, "I'm not sure if I'm the guy." We just read that in the Bellany article. I'm not sure if I'm the guy.
We could tell you that directly, Pete Docter. You're not.
Well, it makes me wonder too, because
Oh man,
think about the things that he's having to probably make decisions on. Pixar is telling stories like Turning Red that are highly reliant on an understanding of the subculture. Pete Docter's a white dude, right? So like, is he stepping in and going like, no, we have to make that more applicable for general audiences, so you have to take that part out, or ooh, that's a joke that's going to push people the wrong way, so we have to take that out. Well, what's the response going to be? Right. You know what I mean? Like, the white guy's telling me I can't put the stuff in the movie that I want to put in the movie.
Which, believe it or not, there are some moments in Elemental. They throw some a couple adult innuendos in there that are very well known. That you could actually say, "Wow!" Like that kind of breaks a little bit of that Pixar barrier of like what is like offensive and what is like too clean.
That's interesting. Wow.
It's like a few moments. It kind of would seem like something that you would hear in a DreamWorks film.
Interesting.
I do agree with you, Jay. I think that's definitely part of it, right? And I think that's why I mean I have a theory. That's one of the reasons why John Lasseter was shown the door, because he just didn't give a shit. It's like it's either a good story or it's not.
Yeah.
And he said that kind of stuff on like in public domain. Yeah. He would like say it to people directly. Are you going to stand here when people are walking out of the theater? Are you going to stand there while people are walking out of the turnstile and say, this budget is this because we're giving you a piece of crap? It's like, that's how he talked. It was like,
he was very candid about it. And I think he felt that honesty needed to be heard, and Walt kind of felt the same way. It's like,
right.
But even he would say, sometimes you just need a good failure. And I think at this point at the studio's history, I think you do need a good couple of failures in order to kind of realize, what's going on here.
They succeeded.
Self-reflect. Yeah.
Yep. Should we pivot to Disney's Chief Diversity Officer, Latondra Newton? This is breaking news.
I think we are. Variety. Disney's Chief Diversity Officer, Latondra Newton, exits. Exclusive via Variety. And Jennifer Moss is going to be the author here. Disney's Chief Diversity Officer and Senior Vice President, Latondra Newton, is exiting her role after more than 6 years, according to an internal memo obtained by Variety. Individual with knowledge of the situation says that Newton will be joining the corporate board of another company soon and plans to devote more time to her cell phone creative company. Isn't she the one selling her own like jewelry line?
I don't know.
I thought that's kind of where she.
That's
what her company was. In her role as head of DEI operations, that's diversity, equity, and inclusion operations at Disney, Newton was charged with overseeing the company's, quote, commitment to produce entertainment that reflects a global audience and sustains a welcoming and inclusive workplace for everyone. Upon her departure, Newton's direct reports will report to Julie Merges on an interim basis until a new chief diversity officer is named. Shelby Curry and the DEI internal communications team will continue to report to internal communications and engagement executive Carrie Brown. Previously, Newton served as Group Vice President of Social Innovation and Chief Diversity Officer at Toyota Motor North America, Inc., and Chief Program Officer for Toyota Mobility Foundation, Toyota Motor Company or Corporation. She began her career at Toyota in 1991. Newton's exit from Disney comes less than a week after CEO Bob Iger announced that CFO Christine McCarthy, her decision to step down from her role. This is a seismic shift
here. This is a seismic shift. I mean, because this is like, it's hard for, I don't know, like for me, it's like this shows, I don't think we're ever going to get to a point with Disney where it's like, they're going to completely get the woke out or whatever you people call it, right? It's Hollywood. There's always going to be that like left-leaning stuff. It's been like that for decades. It's never going to go completely. But I do think this is kind of showing that, like, I mean, she was a very divisive figure at the Walt Disney Company.
Yes.
I mean, I think Iger recognizes that, and he's making moves to sort of improve the company public relations effort and what have you. It doesn't look like they're disbanding the entire group. It looks like they're just replacing her. So maybe they'll put someone in there that's less divisive. Who knows?
We've seen some articles, OG, and how companies are kind of, I don't know, pivoting away from maybe DEI divisions because it's a big money drain. And, when you have a kind of results-oriented, industry, maybe not so much Hollywood, but maybe some others who have these kind of DEI offices, and you're looking at profits and losses, it's like, okay, what are we getting for the amount of money we are spending? What kind of culture have we cultivated here? What kind of long-term implications have we gotten from this investment? And honestly, the math just isn't proving out in a lot of ways, and it's actually creating more strife in some cases within companies than the harmony that is sought by CEOs and other executives alike. So it's a really kind of interesting one. I think Latondra Newton, everything that I've heard from her, I think the company's looking to cut expenses. I think she was one of those, but maybe somebody could take over from me right here before I get myself into trouble.
What do you think, George?
Yeah, I think honestly, like we were, especially coming off of Christine Waistlines McCarthy, they said, they were gonna, make some extra moves after that, and I think this is one of them. Yeah. And it's definitely very telling because of her position, and I mean, if it's to save money where it's not as needed in a sense, as far as in a company division goes, I mean, I can understand why. I mean, because again, they're in each division of the company right now, they're losing money. They're losing money in the streaming service. They're losing money in the studio. As of right now, parks are, I mean, kind of the lesser of the two evils, so to speak, because right now it's what's keeping the studio kind of afloat. But even to that degree, they're still trying to get people in the turnstiles because they're coming out with summer deals and discounts and all that. So no matter which way you look at it, it's like Disney has to kind of cut some weak points. And unfortunately, this job position, depending on no matter who is in it, it's just like it's not needed right now.
Yeah. It's interesting. This is an interesting move. I'm telling you. That was not on my bingo card today. I'll tell you what, fellas.
I know, but these are two big kind of corporate, executives right here that have been ushered out the door here in less than a week. Something is going on at Disney. That is absolutely for sure. I think our intuitions were right, OG, that this was maybe bigger than Christine McCarthy's cited family, medical leave problems, that something is going on here. Big changes are being made, and honestly, they have to. Look,
they have to.
Listen,
yeah.
I mean, the studio division is now. I mean, we just went over some of the box office numbers. They're not doing well at all. I think Elemental, outside of its 3-day or 4-day at $29.5 million, it's. Well, let's actually take a look here. In the Deadline article right here, it actually talks about all of the box office right now. And yes, Flash was number one, but it's not a very good number one with those numbers. But you see right here, Elemental for its 3-day, $29.5 million, 4-day, $33.3 million. That is disastrous for that film. That should be at the very least, $70-80 million. And for it to be so low is disheartening. You're looking at Little Mermaid right here for its, Cume, you're talking about $255 million, but that's by week 4. Look at Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. By week 3, it's already surpassed Little Mermaid at $285 million and was made with like less than half the budget. I mean, that is profound. I mean, Iger's probably looking at all this and going, we need some big substantial changes here.
And honestly, based off of the technology and the CGI disaster that the live-action Little Mermaid was, I would think that it would have been half of the Spider-Verse's budget.
Well, from what we understand, a lot of the budget, a lot of these budgets for these movies coming out right now, were bloated because of the COVID protocols. That was a part of. Now, I'm not saying $250 million worth, but I mean, but a chunk of it. And so that's
it,
probably where a lot of it went, not the CGI. Went to that.
It just seems like that typical quote unquote summer blockbuster doesn't necessarily happen anymore, because it seems like a lot of the films that are pressed to release in the summer aren't doing really well. And then you have a film like Avatar Way of Water, and you have Maverick that's releasing during like these oddball times of the year, and they're the more successful than what is anticipated for the summer.
Right.
I think people are getting real choosy with what they go see and if it resonates at all. And look, I mean, okay, take a film like Little Mermaid, for instance. We know some of the decisions made for that film specifically related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's like, well, that didn't really work out. We know that for Splash Mountain, for instance, of some of those decisions were made for diversity, equity, inclusion, and now that is, it's not dropped off in terms of controversy. It's actually ratcheted up in terms of controversy. So it's like, okay, do we necessarily need these positions anymore, affecting some of our decision making when they just haven't, necessarily materialized in great outcomes?
Yeah. What are your overall thoughts, Mr. Shear?
I think it's really fascinating what's going on in the marketplace in general, and I think that we're in this zone of tension, right? This zone of tension is that in times of plenty, we can add things to our balance sheet that we hope will net out with positive results in the future. Right. In times where the times are a little bit more lean, we have to shed things off the balance sheet, because if those things aren't contributing to profitability, pretty soon we can find ourselves in a place where we would go, we can't pay anybody to be a part of this company, and we have to scale back even more than we wanted to. So I think that there's this, so there's this interesting thing I think that's happening where, and I think that it depends on the organization. It depends on the people in the position. I was laughing about a month ago. People were calling out Chick-fil-A for being too woke because it turns out they have a DEI guy, right? And I thought that was really funny. But I noted that, note how I bet you if we were to look at Chick-fil-A's income statement right now, their revenue did not dip at all. And why is that? Because there are people boycotting Chick-fil-A based on what the owner said, made some comments he made years and years ago, which he actually apologized for based on my knowledge of it. But nobody who is buying from Chick-fil-A is buying because of Chick-fil-A's preferred identity. They're buying because they like chicken sandwiches.
Right, exactly.
Right? We had a guest one time on the Story Geeks podcast who we said, hey, we're going to buy some Chick-fil-A for you. And he came in and he goes, this is really good, but I've never had it before because of the comments made by the guy. I was like, wow. Yeah, but it's still good, right? It still tastes good. And opposed to, like, for example, the Bud Light controversy, where it's obvious that most people who drink Bud Light were not drinking it because Bud Light's a really good beer, but rather because it meant something to them about Americana and about what they drank when they were in a frat in college or whatever, right?
Right.
So I think that if you're building your brand based off identity politics, you're probably doing yourself a disservice. Then when it comes to how you're structuring your organization, if you put the purpose of DEI is to make the end products better. How do you make the end products better? By having DEI. You say the world is changing. The United States as a populace is becoming less white and much more diverse. We should have DEI that helps us bridge the gap to new stories, to new types of experiences. Let's not do the same old thing anymore. But so in other words, DEI is there to help the organization become better at whatever it does. If DEI instead steps in and goes, actually, there's some quotas that we have, and I don't care if it's better, you need to do it a different way, suddenly we get ourselves into a very sticky situation, because now it's about identity politics, not about the final product. Right. I think that's where some of these companies are having a really hard time navigating that. I think, like, I see Chick-fil-A and it's like, first of all, none of you even knew that there was one. There was a DEI person at Chick-fil-A. Second of all, you only went to Chick-fil-A because you cared about the sandwiches, probably, right? Like, and so I think that in these kind of situations, it's interesting to see what the moves are, because it could be indicative of an overstep in a certain area.
Right.
Is it indicative of that? I don't know. I think that I would tell you just from my personal opinion. This is Jay's personal opinion. Not even an OG 55 stamped approved opinion. But I would tell you that I think that personally speaking, Black Panther and Ryan Coogler killed it. They applied the Marvel storytelling principles to a story that was largely about the Black community. And I thought it was done amazingly well.
100%.
I think that Turning Red dropped the ball because I think they took an immigrant story, and instead of inviting people into it to understand that situation better, they actually made some people confused at the end of it because they went, I'm not coming with you anymore. It feels like you're saying something.
Not to mention a bit uncomfortable, like their approach with certain
very
things.
uncomfortable. And yes, absolutely, George, absolutely,
100%. I actually have someone in my family who is Asian, who is an immigrant as well, and she was she was look, and this is the thing, like Disney markets this as like an inclusive representation thing for her. I mean, she's Vietnamese, she's Asian, and an immigrant, and she found a lot of that movie kind of insulting, to be honest. She wasn't like flattered or anything. She felt it was very pandery, and it was done in an insulting way. So
wait, hold on, OG, hold on. She found it was very panda-y.
George,
yes, folks, we only have high class stuff on this show.
Yeah, but I mean, she was like, this isn't like, like she didn't feel like it was something that was like, there's like you said, Jay, with Black Panther, handled very well, perfectly. And Turning Red, not so much, I mean, it was just kind of like there were things in that movie I was like George, you were saying, kind of uncomfortable, and it wasn't just the white guy saying it, Right. I mean, she's Asian and she was saying the same stuff. So
right.
I think in the face of a changing world, you concentrate on humanistic stories, things that resonate. And look, it's if you're marketing your films towards an international audience, you have to think of those humanistic qualities because you have to have a product that speaks to, people in very, very diverse regions of the world with very different, maybe like, let's say, social values and so forth, and different languages and whatever. I mean, it's that kind of that Joseph Campbell kind of,
and that's where I kind of appreciated Luca, because Luca was based off of the Italian culture, but it wasn't where it was like they just kind of used it as like the backdrop as the main story, but it was like they weren't like exactly. Yeah,
it was beautifully. Yeah, it was an Italian based story, but it was like a human story at its core. Yep. So you could relate to it even if you're not Italian. I mean, George, as an Italian, how many cannolis you give it? 4 out of 5 cannolis? Or what would you say that movie?
I give that a 3.5 because I bit off the 4th one.
Okay.
I was just gonna say the same thing, OG. I was gonna say there are certain, and this is what Pixar used to be so good at. There are certain human experiences that are shared cross-culturally, cross-border, cross-socioeconomic value, what it means to be driven by your emotions. That's shared across every single culture you'll find on Earth, right? What it's like to be a part of a toy group and have another toy step in, right? Like these are stories that are ubiquitous and cross-cultural. But the problem is that we don't share experiences across every type of experience. Some people live in communist countries where, literally, if you watch Chernobyl, the HBO Max series Chernobyl, which is phenomenal, highly recommended. You quickly learn that the way that the Russian population has been geared to think is very different than the American population. The American population would be like, screw you, government. We're not doing what you're telling us to do. Whereas the Russian population was very much like, they've been inundated with this. We do things for the community and we are communal. And that's why we are going to make some of the decisions we're going to make. And so those stories may not resonate across different cultures. But there's a lot of things that we share with Russians, of course, shared human experiences, and you could tell those stories and make those stories meaningful. George Lucas told a futuristic story about Eastern mysticism towards a huge general audience, which was predominantly Judeo-Christian at the time that movie came out. And yet he included elements that all those groups would understand and had a shared experience around. So this is not impossible to do. It's just that if you don't self-correct a little bit, and I have to think about this as I write my stories too, right? Like I have to self-correct and be like, wait, I got to figure out what's another way of viewing this that's maybe not the way that I view it, so that I understand it a little bit better. And I think that's what Disney needs right now. They need that in as much as they can get.
And 100%. Actually, John Lasseter said it well, actually, on the documentary, the Pixar story, when he was referring to Toy Story 2, of like how people were going to resonate with this 4-minute ballad about Jessie and her sense of abandonment and her getting left behind and trust issues and what have you. And audiences took to that. And then like after people came out of that theater and Lasseter said it, he said it actually goes to show this is not data. These characters are alive. They are touching people in a way that is relatable to something in their own personal life.
Yeah, right. I mean, say in the same documentary, John was asked back in 1980, by the way, this is long before he even tags up with Steve Jobs or anybody else, still working with Disney, doing shorts and, winning studio achievements for it. He was asked about, hey, do you think your shorts will, can they be drawn out and, be delivered towards a mainstream audience in the form of a theatrical distribution deal? And he's like, oh yeah, absolutely. These are entertainment pieces, and what is entertainment? It's just it's a story that kind of speaks to all of us, and people find value in, and you can just grab a popcorn and sit down and watch it. But even back then, he was thinking about the audience, right? He was thinking about what collective experience that he could tell, and no matter who you were, you could come into a theater, be immersed in something, and come out of it better than when you walked into it. Disney needs those kind of guys, and they need them desperately, to Jay's point, for sure. I want to end with a quote from Walt Disney real fast. It says, when planning a new picture, we don't think of grown-ups, we don't think of children. But just of that fine, clean, unspoiled spot down deep in every one of us that maybe the world has made us forget, and that maybe our pictures can help recall. That kind of stuff we got to get back to, and desperately.
Yeah, and then George, final thought. I know you wanted to.
Oh no, I was just going to say, and you think Disney would have learned, because essentially they let go of Lasseter several times, and it's like, I mean, can't you think to say, okay, you let him go, you brought him back, you let him go again? It's like
a big part of that $7 billion purchase was for Lasseter specifically, and to let that guy walk out the door. Again, I mean, look, there are obviously industry, problems affecting everybody, not just Disney, right? There are market forces that Disney has no control over, which they are victim to, of course. But some of these things are self-inflicted, and I think not going to bat for John, I think it's going to be one of those.
There we go. Now, I do want to apologize. I believe at the intro, I forgot to. You did I get you, Jay and George, in that intro?
No,
I did not. Okay, I thought because we started going. I'm like, crap, I forgot. So I do apologize,
That's
Jay and George.
Jay does such a good job of covering all the things that we do. So it's like,
yeah, he does. So I was like, okay, we'll hit the ground running. I am so sorry, fellas, but so I'll start with you guys. Jay, if you could let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, what you're working on right now.
Check out Jay Shear on Twitter. You can follow me over there. Hear some of my thoughts about these kinds of things as they appear. Also, the Story Geek Show here on OG 55 is a great place to hear some of the things we're talking about. Currently doing a bunch of Indiana Jones content. almost too much Indiana Jones content. I'm watching so many Indiana Jones things, it's ridiculous. You can also catch me on How Stories Work with Jay Shear. That's a separate YouTube channel where I'm primarily talking about writing and storytelling. So if you're a writer or a storyteller, or maybe you're an actor director, you might want to check out some of that content over there. That is also where we will put our original content. So we have a short film that we're filming this year. Got some really fantastic news this week. I'll be able to hopefully announce soon that we are casting one of the lead roles in that, which would be phenomenal. Had some really good conversations this week. So stay tuned to all of that over at How Stories Work with Jay Shear.
Perfect. And down below, we got Citrus George, host of the Walt Disney World Show here on the channel. George, if you can let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Absolutely. And before I do, OG, I just have to jump on that train. It's like you leaving me out in the beginning. I am offended. So it's like,
Wait, did you say jump on that train?
yes.
Hold on one sec, since we got a train. There we go.
Cool. No, it's all good, brother. But yeah, if you want to find me, right now I am letting go of the Disney Family Man 23 channel. There's going to be no new content coming out of that YouTube channel. If you want to check out what was already on there, please feel free to do so. But you can interact with me on Twitter at Disney George. You could check out the podcast I am part of called A Walk with Walt. And of course, you can find me here on my home base on Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
Perfect. And you know, I haven't dropped this drop in a long time, but since we got into some Chapek stuff today.
Apologize for not being the ally that you needed me to be.
There we go. It just had to be done. And
I think Dre, he's
a very serious expression.
Yeah, Dre? Yeah, I think he's frozen. Okay. Well, I'll take him off. Yeah. Sorry, Dre. All right. Well, you can find Dre at Vash Sky on Twitter, and you can find him here on Orange Grove 55 as a regular. He's a producer. He's on as many videos as I'm on, basically. He's on all the time. So check out Dre on Twitter and here on the channel. I want to thank you, fellas, for coming on, talking shop with us today on the Orange Nerd Show. And thank everybody at home for watching. And comment down below with all your thoughts on everything that we discussed today.
And I'm sorry, really quick, isn't that ironic that we didn't get to go at the beginning and Dre didn't get to go at the end?
I know, right? It's the universe. It's like Thanos balance.
It's like a poem. It rhymes.
Right, exactly. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye, everybody.
フォースと共にあらんこと